Did you know that for some countries, that when we talk about the word democracy, it's not just about the voting rights. It's not just about the legalization of the gay marriages. To some extent, that women today, in some countries, are not actually able to enjoy the word democracy or able to live under this democratic system. For example, in the country of Afghanistan. For so long that we know this country is well known for this whole internal, or what we called domestic chaos. However, as soon as the U.S. put the troops out of this country under the ruling of Taliban, guess what? Women today face much greater pressure, or should we call this economic and social chaos today. How come the mainstream media never talk about this? As profound as it is, democracy should be preserved and well protected around the world, but somehow, for women in Afghanistan are being overlooked one after another. Well, that's why in this episode, we need to talk about the country of Afghanistan and what about this democracy or the democratic concept for women today. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to invite our distinguished guest, which is Zahra Nader. Again, if you're familiar with Zahra, Zahra is Afghan-Canadian journalist and editor-in-chief of Zan Times, a media that covers human rights violation in Afghanistan with a focus on women, the LGBTQI community, and environmental issues. She started her career in 2011 in Kabul, writing and editing for Afghan local media outlets. In 2016, she joined the New York Times bureau in Kabul, becoming the first Afghan woman journalist to work with a mainstream English language media since 2001. Zahra, and welcome to The Missing Piece.
Thank you, Will. I really, really appreciate this opportunity to be here to talk to you and to your audience. It is just an honor for me.
Thank you, Zahra. The pleasure is all mine. Again, as we mentioned in the intro, we're in the year of 2023, and people are still enjoying using the word democracy. And again, when we talk about democracy, as we mentioned before, it's not just about the voting rights. It's not just about legalization of certain rights. However, today in Afghanistan, and again, before talking to you, I was able to research and find out one of the unique articles that you wrote, which entitled, "We Have to Fight Back. Afghan Women Are Losing Their Hard-Won Rights to Work Under the Taliban." Now, Zahra, help us to understand. As soon as the U.S. troops got pulled out and Taliban took over the country, why was it so difficult for women today not only to find work, but also even to protect themselves? Can you help us to understand how critical and how harsh the conditions are today?
Thank you so much, Will. If I may, I would always love to add a little bit of history because we tend to look at events, incidents as it happens, as like we think that this has been always like this. I want to take us a little bit back, like how we started. As a woman, I grew up the first time Taliban were around. My family was forced to leave Afghanistan. They went to Iran, where I was denied the right to education. That was the first time I heard about the Taliban, and I got to know who they are and what they do. And then my entire life, that I feel I started my real life from then, was when I went back to Afghanistan after the Taliban collapsed. I went to school, I get an education, even though the area that I grew up was very poor. I studied in a school that didn't have a classroom. I studied under a tent that was donated by UNICEF. And it's very difficulty, but the rights to education was there for me, and I was able to get an education, which helped me to get where I am right now today as a journalist, able to tell the stories. But how did we get here is a very good question. Like, why suddenly overnight all the rights, political, social, economic, cultural rights of Afghan women was stripped from them the moment that the Taliban took over the country? I think it's very, very difficult question. First of all, is that we, as the people of Afghanistan, have little power to make decision about our future. What really happened is even in 2021, the invasion of Afghanistan started with 9/11, and that was the decision of other countries that they wanted to invade Afghanistan and frame their own interest into narrative of women's rights, freedom, liberation of women is much easier to get public support. Rather than to just say, like, we're going to invade this country, we're going to go and, bombard civilians because they did 9/11, right? It's always easier to say, oh, look at that place. Oh, women are so much oppressed. As a powerful countries, as a countries that promote democracy and liberty, we have a responsibility to save them, to help them. And that was the narrative. If it wasn't the main narrative, it was a bigger one, the one that really, really mobilized public support for invasion of Afghanistan. And when these all countries came to Afghanistan, what really happened? Did women be liberated as they were framing that we are saving and liberating Afghan women? That didn't happen. Why it didn't happen? Because our demands, our need was not at the center of this project, was not at the center of the invasion. It was the other countries' interest, what they wanted to do with Afghanistan, how they wanted to frame it, how they wanted to make Afghanistan into a country that is no longer, a terrorist hub. So how they do about it was actually very, very interesting, because they didn't done anything you would really say, like, oh, this area, like, I know they helped open the school, as I earlier mentioned, that I went to that school and I get education. But my point is that this decision, women's rights in Afghanistan were seen as a project. Like, okay, like, how should we deal with this? How should we go about liberating Afghan women? Oh, maybe we need one project for education. We need this project for women empowerment. We need this. So it starts with the point of other people, some of whom might never had the chance to actually visit Afghanistan, to have conversation with real people living there. They were the one making decision of what project is needed for these women to liberate them. Not those women's interests, not what those women wanted. Were little or too rarely, part of the discussion. What do you want for us to bring to you? And as a woman journalist, I worked in Afghanistan, and I am still engaged, and I'm working right now as editor-in-chief of Zan Times. And I somehow now used to see this, that our need, what we think is important, is rarely shaping anything, because we are not the one with the power. The one with power are the countries that makes negotiation with the Taliban, that meet with the Taliban, and their narrative is that, oh, we are trying to support women's rights in Afghanistan. We are trying to ask the Taliban to reverse some of these laws. But how do they go about doing it is still not so much. They're not in contact, they're not in conversation with the people of Afghanistan, with the women of Afghanistan. They're mostly in contact with the people who are part of the disaster that happened. They are listening to the people who were part of this problem. Also, who were Afghans, but didn't really take part on to the part of the people, because, as you know, Afghanistan was one of the most corrupt countries as well in the past 20 years. So that corruption was sort of a reason that the people feel that this government is not representing them, that what they do is not what the people of Afghanistan needed to be done or something. So basically, my point is that the demand of Afghan people, what they wanted for their country, how they imagined their country, wasn't the defining factor. It was other people making decisions about our future. And the peace deal that the US made with the Taliban was also part of that decision that brought us here today, the situation that we are seeing, that all women of Afghanistan are stripped of their rights because of the deal the US and other countries made with the Taliban, because it was them saying, like, okay, we are very tired of, this 20 years struggle of fighting with you. Now just here is a deal. You won't attack us. We won't attack you. And we don't care about the rest of what's going to happen to women of Afghanistan and what's going to happen to the population of Afghanistan in entirely. So what I see as problem is us not being able to put our demand at the center and being able to have the power to push for it and to ask for it and to say that this is what's needed to be done. And now that I'm working at Zan Times, most of the time I get these feelings, even as a journalist, and I say, we are doing this as Afghan women journalists, and this is what needs to be done. This is what we want to do, and sometimes we of course need support. And the conversation when I get with some of the power holders, they say like, maybe it's not something we want to do. Like supporting you is not because you have a critical voice against us and you're saying, you're not so much promoting our interests. So those are negotiations. I'm just giving you small pieces of like how, like everything is not so much as we want it to be, but rather those who have effect in through different means. That could be one times like money, the politics, there's so many levels involved. But what I see right now that women doesn't have any rights to social, political, economic, any rights at all, and their basic human rights is violated. They cannot go to school, they cannot go to work, and an estimated 20 million women are living in Afghanistan. And basically today they don't have a right to live as a human, because what kind of human are you when you cannot get an education, when you cannot go to work and earn your living, when you cannot even leave your house without a male chaperone? What kind of human are you going to be? I won't really say that, but I use the term is that they deny the humanity of Afghan women, the women of Afghanistan. And we are seeing little is being done to really reverse this. And my worry is that one part is that this huge violation is happening in Afghanistan. And it's been seen as a problem of Afghanistan. Like, you really, as you started saying, that there's not a lots of news is not on the international media talking about this. So we see that the problem is there, but it's being seen as a problem of Afghanistan and not as a problem of the world. But my concern is that once it started somewhere, it's not going to be contained there. What happened in Afghanistan is not going to stay in Afghanistan. First of all, is the Taliban and extremist groups that we know they have relationship with Al-Qaeda. Just, even though they had this agreement with the US to not have any relationship with Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda leader was found in Kabul. So how to trust this group is something that people of Afghanistan from the very beginning said that the Taliban cannot be trusted. Women of Afghanistan was the loudest saying that they cannot be trusted, that they should not be trusted with the rights of women and the rights of people in Afghanistan. But it was a decision of other countries that said, we are tired and this is the time to hand over the country back to the Taliban. And we know what happened since then.
Based on the Taliban's latest guidance, which advised that women cover their faces in public, and despite the heat, that they should be wearing gloves and burqa and the flowing garment that covers the entire head and face. And also within the article, you also mentioned such an administration called Vice and Virtue, which is notorious for its often violent enforcement for such restrictions. Help us to understand how big is the impact of vice and virtue, and by restricting those rules upon women, what kind of message does the government send to the people, especially women in Afghanistan, Zahra?
I think let's get back from here that who the Taliban are. Their most defining feature is oppression of women, is misogyny, and they made it clear even in their first time they ruled Afghanistan, and of course now, that is their distinct feature, because we have many, extremist groups all over the world, but none of them having the defining feature that the Taliban have. And the Taliban's most defining feature is animosity with women, of hatred of women. And the moment they take over the country, they made it clear that animosity still defined them. That feature is still the huge part that make the Taliban. In their second week in power, that was like August 24th, of 2021. They disappointed, claiming on the 17th of that month, 2 days after taking over, they said, the Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid said that they would respect women's rights, that they would respect freedom of media, according to Sharia law. But let's even this condition of according to Sharia law, we have so many Muslim countries all over the world. They are also, ruling according. Some of them are doing according to Islam, but none of them ask women to cover themselves head to toe. None of them order women to stay home and don't get an education, don't go to work. None of them does that. So Taliban are trying to brand themselves as this unique, pure Islamic country, something like the time of Prophet Muhammad. But it's strange point is that they are enjoying the freedom of 21st century life. They are on the internet. They have brand watches. They have they use military equipment from the US and other countries. They enjoy all part of modern life, except the part that they don't like for the women, and they want women to, just be totally erased from society. They don't want to see women on the streets. They don't want to see women at work. So basically, they want to build the accurate term to define the situation is gender apartheid, even though the legal form or the legal law is not recognized as yet, because we only know racial apartheid, which was in South Africa, but we don't really have a concept that apply to gender apartheid. But if we just get that, that framework of racial apartheid and just change the racial with gender, that you will get the gender apartheid, because exactly that applies to the situation of Afghanistan and how the Taliban treat women. So they are an extremist group, and misogyny and animosity with women is their defining feature. But we are seeing now, it's close to 2 years, going to be 2 years soon, after Taliban takeover. And what we are seeing, the constant threat is that they are getting even worse. The violation they started from the second week, which they ordered women in public sector to stay home. And what was their claim? Our soldiers are not ready to respect you. You have to stay home until we get them ready to respect you, meaning that our soldiers are not familiar. It's not normal for them to see women on the streets, to see women at work. So they might beat you. They might do something violent. So that was their claim, that let us train them, then you will be able to come back. But that was in their second week in power. And then in their 1 month in power, they banned school for teenage girls, saying that they need sort of framework that prepare the condition for women to go to school. But that was very strange, because schools is already gender segregated in Afghanistan.
That's right.
Like high school. We don't have any school. If they're private, I don't know. But the public schools, I studied on this school. It was all gender segregated. We didn't have any class that male and female studied together in school. So what the Taliban were saying was basically a baseless claim of we're going to create a situation for them to, already they were gender segregated, and most of women were teaching them. So there wasn't anything you could really say that is something that the Taliban has to fix it according to Sharia law. Because Afghanistan was an Islamic country even before the Taliban take over. So it was in their second month, the first month, they did this on 17th of September. And then after that, they continued to clamp down. The next thing that they did is ordering women that they cannot travel without a chaperone. It was interesting because in their claim, they say you have to be 40 if you're traveling more than 45 miles. But what we as a journalist understood, and we talked to the people on the ground and other journalists as well, we find out that restriction that the Taliban announced would be implemented for more than 45 miles of women traveling alone without a male chaperone is actually being implemented even for women who are visiting a clinic. Just, just half an hour walk, because they will be stopped and say where is your mahram? If you don't have a mahram, you should stay at home. And mahram means specifically to say, a blood-related family that you cannot marry, or your husband, your father-in-law, again, somebody that is close to you. So it can be somebody that's your cousin, can be your mahram. And So they say that they cannot travel or leave their houses. In many provinces, it's like you can't leave your house if you don't have a mahram. And then we have these restrictions that women have to cover their faces when they're in public. This happened on May. And if they don't do it, there's going to be a punishment for male family member of that woman. That strips women of their agency of resisting the Taliban, because the violation, if they resist the Taliban, it would be their male family member who would be subject to punishment. And what they would do is basically the Taliban, with this order, the Taliban, in effect, created all male family members of a family, and all male in a family, to be the Taliban agent, to implement what the Taliban wants on their family members. So that's how it works. And then we have them, they didn't open their school. They were supposed to open their school in March, but they didn't say like, oh, there's a negotiation. But the claim was still that they will open their school. And then they banned the university, and then they banned the work of women with the NGOs, because the public work was already closed. But now with the NGOs, they cannot work. So we are seeing this every day. It's getting worse. And venue for women to earn their living, to continue to live, is shutting down for them. And Afghanistan is one of the countries that has one of the most population of widow women, because 4 decades of war left many women, their husbands is dead, either fighting or on an explosion or something that we have a lot in Afghanistan. So there are so many women in Afghanistan that actually don't have a mahram, don't have a close male relative to support them, to take them out to the clinic. And if they do, that man is supposed to go work, because the woman cannot work. There is many levels of suffering. And when we are seeing that 95% of population of Afghanistan are suffering from hunger, it's not because they suddenly all, doesn't have anything to eat, because these policies that the Taliban are implementing, making it impossible for them to continue their life. So what we are seeing is actually, it's very strange for me, is that we are being 40 millions every 2 weeks or every week being shipped by international community to Afghanistan, and that's being said that's going to support the humanitarian crisis. And then my question is, for how long the world can feed? First of all, there's a lot of doubt where that money is going, because as journalists, I am aware that most of that money doesn't go to the people who are really at risk. And we have run so many stories in our news outlet, Zan Times, about how the people who really need this, they're going hungry because they don't have access to this aid. But where that money goes is something that we hope to discover through other stories, to really give a picture of where that money is going. But for now, my question would be, as long as the Taliban in power, as long as they're denying the humanity of half of the society, banning them from education, banning them from earning their living, what is the possibility that we overcome this hunger, this humanitarian crisis, and move forward? Because we can't. The one that's making it impossible are the Taliban, and they're in power, and this money that to them make their system works because they continue to function. So this is the situation that we are dealing right now, and who are suffering is the people of Afghanistan, and most importantly, half of the population of Afghanistan, which are women.
Zahra, again, for me, it's quite unfathomable to think about, even to understand that the freedom of receiving education is being taken away by the Taliban. Again, you close down all the schools and you close down all the educational centers. But Zahra, I can't help asking this question. For the Taliban, do you think they are more fearful towards the concept of education, or they're more anxious about how education could transform people, particularly women, in a greater way? So in other words, how much do you think that they're worried that the effectiveness of education could actually cause the brevity or the inspiration for women to stand up to this ruthless behavior or to this inhumane government? You see what I'm saying? So in other words, why tackle education So in other words, don't you think, again, this is a silly question. If you are working for the Taliban, don't you think that people ought to be more educated so that they can bring more contribution to the society or even to the country? Why would you ban them from going to the school? Why would you ban women from attending the educational institutions? What is the purpose behind it? What is the logistics behind such, not even a political, but social agenda? What do you think, Zahra?
First of all, I think again going back to who the Taliban are and their most defining feature, Taliban promoted, and their vision of a pure Islamic country is a country where women doesn't really exist in society, where they're only confined to their houses, where only their productivity is to serve the men. So that's what the Taliban first start to imagine with. And then, of course, why they ban education? Because education is where people think, where it makes them contradict the Taliban's way of looking at the world and interpreting the world. So the Taliban doesn't want that. It's I think it was in the social media, I listened to a Taliban advocate. He was saying that there was a conversation when the Taliban banned the university for women. There was a conversation around that if we ban the education for women, then we don't have any female doctor to treat, like females. How do we go about resolving that and making sure that, because they don't like men treat women. So that's something that's according to their way of looking, and Sharia is not acceptable for men to treat women, right? So how they should deal with this? Like if we close the universities, but then they were talking, maybe we can open, specially only school for doctors, like the women came and studied and just became the doctors. And then there was one activist for the Taliban, which I was listening on social media, and he was saying, like, look, if we allow this woman to get an education, to get a doctor, when they go to university, all of them not going to be doctors. They're going to be journalists. They're going to be, scientists. They're going to be something else, which we don't like them to be. So it's not a solution for us to open university for them, because they get education. And when they get education, they want to fight back for their rights. They want to resist, and they know why it's important, and they understand the irrationality. I can't even find the accurate word to describe what really the Taliban are doing, because it's just unimaginable, like the level of, foolishness they go to deny women's their rights. It's just, like I have never seen, and I imagine, like, before the Taliban take over in August, I was thinking that maybe in 90s, that was like the most, like foolishness that we have in our history. And I was thinking that was the past. But no, actually, this is happening again. And it even more intensified version of that. And I'm reading now some of the research, some of the reports produced during the 90s. And I compare this with now, and I feel that it's now more pressured. Women are now more pressured because, like in the past 20 years, there was a possibility of education. Women are getting education, and they were building a life for themselves. They have a vision of like what they want to do, who they want to be, and how they want to contribute to their society. What we are seeing now is all of them no longer have a hope for the future. Like future seems dark, because as long as the Taliban is in power, there is no hope for them. They can't do anything, and they cannot be who they wanted to be. And basically no hope. They can only be housewives and be mothers. And that's what the Taliban imagined them to be, just a housewife inside the house, not leaving the house. And of course, that's not what women of Afghanistan want.
Right.
And now their demand, what they think, what they want, is not being so much seen by the world, because we are seeing a world that is accommodating the Taliban, that's understanding of, they are the Taliban, and listing how we can deal with them. Let's give them some incentive and ask them to change, and call on them and say like, let's please change, that this is a violation. But do the Taliban really understand, words really respected? Of course not. And we have seen it many, many times. And they continue to take pride in what they denied women of Afghanistan. And that point of taking pride would really show you that they do have no regret, and there will be no change as long as they are in power.
Well, Zahra, again, it's it is heartbreaking to listen to the description that women today in Afghanistan are expected to be housewives. So in other words, pretty much to sum up is the Taliban took away the identities or took away the opportunities for women to enjoy the freedom. Now, I know you're very busy. Now, I got two more questions before letting you go. I want to talk about the brave women journalists living in Taliban. I mean, living under the ruling of Taliban. I know another article that you described how the women or the women journalists, in today's Afghanistan, that they were willing to work for free. It's better than staying at home and grieving. Again, these words shocked to my soul. It's rather hard to believe. As a journalist myself, I couldn't imagine what does that mean to rather work for free than grieving and staying at home. So, Sarah, help us to understand what kind of inspiration, what kind of reasons for those women, or again, maybe for work for the Zan Times, continue to be journalists, and again, how dangerous it is today for women in live in Afghanistan to cover news and to report the truth, and despite all the hurdles and difficulties.
Thank you for that question, Bill. One of the reasons that Zan Times exists, it's because of the will of women journalists to continue their work. And they are very clear that they are standing and they are fighting because that's what needed. And Zan, if I may to say that Zan is the Persian Dari word, that means woman. And this is our way of saying that we will resist the Taliban, that we will speak our truth. And at this time that we are living, Afghanistan is the most severe women's rights crisis on the planet. We don't have any place on the world that deny women the right to education and work to the extent the Taliban are doing. And Zan Times is our initiative to say at this crucial time that the Taliban are denying our basic human rights to exist, to live as people, we are there, we tell our story, we fight back. And we are here to document our own history, to really say at the face of this injustice, how did women of Afghanistan fight? How did they resist? You just can't imagine your life in a situation, because always hope that we woke up in the morning with a hope that what I will be doing today, who I will be doing today, and how the work that I do today contribute to the future self of me, what I want to achieve in the future. You always wake up with a hope of doing something, of being something, of contributing to society, to your family, to somebody. And then look at poor Afghan women. When they woke up in the morning, there is nothing for them to look forward to. There is no hope, no building of future. What they see is all suffering and struggle. And how do they really live these days? That's something that gives us power. And women journalists are at the heart of, because they are there and they are reporting the lives of women. How do those women are living there these days? This is women journalists who have access to their stories, who can go to them and talk to them and get a sense of how do they live. I've been recently fortunate enough to participate in one of the online platforms which women in Afghanistan created within themselves. A group of university students, teachers, they all came together and said, it's so much hopelessness. We can't bear it alone. So let's come together. They have a book club. They read books, and they really sort of keep each other motivated. And I was listening to them, and they were reading poetry that is about resistance, that is about fighting back. That's not giving up for what you're fighting. And then when one of them were reading, and then the other would come up and, such emotional, giving us emotional support that, was such a beautiful poem. I can feel you, we're all going through the same thing. But you know what? This day is going to pass. And you don't know how much powerful those messages are, because especially I explained that how the situation they're living in and the hope that they're trying to keep up. And I see women journalists as a part of that. And my own colleagues, sometimes when I talk to them, my most fear is about security, because I know now being a journalist is being criminal in Afghanistan. Even criminal. The Taliban opened the door of prison when they took over. They let all the prisoners, the killers, the abuser of women's rights, anyone who were there, the Taliban let them walk free. But journalists, we have so many journalists right now in Taliban prisons. And we have so many journalists who can't work because of this fear, because of the situation, the censorship the Taliban created. So now the journalist is being criminal by default. If you're a journalist, you're criminal. And if you are continuing your work, of course, you're taking risk. And bringing any story from Afghanistan is at the cost of a journalist's lives. So if the Taliban caught them, definitely they would be tortured, they would be beaten, and God knows what else was going to happen to them. But their life is at risk. But they're bringing this story at the cost of their own lives. And when I talk to them, I ask them about security and what we can do to protect them. And that I'm worried of, like, this is like everything is getting worse. And they give me hope. They say, hey, the risk is there. We are aware of the risk. We know the risks. But what if we stop? Stop. We lose hope for ourselves and for the women who we are trying to help to bring their stories to a wider audience, at least know what's happening to them right now. This telling of our story is not just doing journalism, or just saying, oh, this happened. First of all, this is covering our own losses, because we are also living in this country that denies our right to exist as human. We are resisting that at the first, and then we have a hope. Every morning that when we woke up, we know that we are contributing to something greater than ourselves, that we are helping to keep the world informed of what is happening in Afghanistan. And that's a valuable contribution that we will take pride in, that we'll say, no matter what's happening, no matter how much I'm being oppressed, no matter if I'm not being able to leave my house, I'm able to continue my work. And that's valuable. And I really, really admire their courage, because it's hard to produce journalism at the cost of your own lives. And my colleagues and other journalists who are working in Afghanistan, they are doing that. And these brave women journalists that we write about them, they are working for free because they also try to keep the world informed and keep trying to claim to their professional identities, who is now denied. So they're doing it at free. They are not getting anything. They are using their own, they're paying for their own car fare or whatever they're using, just to be journalists, just to claim to that professional identity that is lost under the Taliban. And you can see that the level of abuse that they are going through, from sexual harassment from the Taliban, first of all, from denying their rights to continue their work as professional journalists, and then the sexual exploitation, and from the Taliban, from the environment, and also from the newsroom itself. They are working for a newsroom who is not willing to pay them. The same newsroom who used to pay them before the Taliban take over, and now they see the situation. They also can take use of it. Like, if you want to work for free, you can work. If not, and they know that those women are committed to their task. They want to continue and they want to be journalists. So they use and exploit the situation. And that's very, very heartbreaking for me to see at this situation that we really need support, that we really need to empower women journalists to continue their work. We have newsrooms in Afghanistan who refuse to pay them and say, like, if you're a man, I'm going to pay you. If you're a woman, no, you have to work for free. So that is heartbreaking, but I admire their courage, and I really hope the world to see their courage for what it is, and to support them, and to be their voice, and to amplify the voice of these brave and courageous women journalists who continue their work. And they can definitely read some of their work. We have a group of women journalists in Afghanistan working with us at Zan Times, and I'm so proud of them. And I really, really look forward to the day I can name them with their real name, to introduce to the world who they are, what they have done to keep the world informed since the Taliban took over.
That's right, Zahra. Again, you sort of already answered my ending question, but again, it is. Of course, as a journalist myself, I truly, again, I said it before and many times, admire the brevity of those women journalists and really feel inspired and motivated, continue not just to travel under the limitations, but to report the truth and the whole truth, nothing but the truth regarding this social and political hurdles happening today in the country of Afghanistan. So again, Zahra, I really admire the work that you do at the Zan Times and with your colleagues, and I hope and I pray that one day we're able to name, acknowledge, and honor those women journalists. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to speak to Zahra Nader. Again, Zahra, it's an Afghan-Canadian journalist and editor-in-chief of Zan Times, a media that covers human rights violation in Afghanistan with a focus on women, the LGBTQI community, and environmental issues. Zahra, thank you so much for taking your time to be on the show, and we hope and I pray not only for you but also for your colleagues are safe and sound as they continue their work and also their journeys in Afghanistan. Please keep us posted, and you're always welcome to come on the show to share anything related to Afghanistan and also your amazing news stories from Zan Times. So again, thank you so much for doing this.